Welcome back to uslayrradio.com. I'm DJ Klutzcat, and you're listening to the very first episode of my new show, Pushing the Envelope. This is a show where I'm going to be interviewing artists who are experimental and forward-thinking within their genre. I'm hoping to get a wide variety of styles. The common thread is just that they're experimental in some way. And today we're joined by Ari Finkel with his moniker Fake Phone Number. He released his first album under this name in February. The album is called Battle Royale on Paper. I think it's a really great album that creates this constant atmosphere that's at the same time very dark and somewhat humorous. And he achieves this balance of dark and humorous by using these samples that could really be interpreted in multiple ways, and the samples actually kind of interact with each other throughout the album. And these samples are surrounded by this soundscape that is very disorienting and alien. I was really excited to interview Ari, and actually ended up interviewing him twice because the first interview didn't get recorded properly. And Ari was also kind enough to provide a 30-minute mix that we'll be playing after the interview, so stick around for that. So before we get to the interview, I wanted to play one of my favorite tracks off the album, which is the closer, Halloween All Year. I think this track does a great job of taking a lot of the techno and textual elements that have previously been used in kind of this atmospheric way and synthesizing them into this rhythmic IDM track that does a great job of representing a lot of what the album sounds like. After this track, we're going to jump right into the interview and mix, so I hope you enjoy the show today. This is Halloween All Year by Fake Phone Number on uslayrradio.com. Welcome, Ari Finkel of Fake Phone Number. We are here on my show, Pushing the Envelope, talking about experimental artists. And yeah, today we have Ari. You just came out with, well, in February, you came out with your debut album under this moniker called Battle Royale on Paper. Could you talk a little bit about your history with making music and what's that's been like?
Yeah. So I pretty much have been making music since I was like 12, 13. Like most kids growing up in the Jersey suburbs, I started playing guitar when I was 11 or 12 or something like that. And um, everything was punk rock for a long time. Like there's a big punk scene in my town, a lot of weird like ska punk stuff for some reason. But that was the biggest early inspiration. Yeah, like, punk stuff, New York City punk and stuff like that. And then when I was around 16, I think I started getting into, well, I guess I got into electronic music when I was like 14, 15. My friend showed me Aphex Twin and some noise music and stuff like that. And I basically like swore off rock for all time or so, I thought. And got Ableton, started making stuff with that, got a bunch of synths, started like looking for stuff at garage sales, and was in a couple noise bands with my friends. And in college, started taking it more seriously, making like IDM sort of stuff, really, complex, composed, not like dance music, but like beat-driven electronic music. And throughout college, I did that under the moniker Dolly Vision. That was my older name, which I have a couple records out under with my friend's label called Jazz. And then after doing that for a couple years, I started getting back into rock and songwriting and stuff a lot, surprisingly. Not through any choice of my own, it just happened. And for the past couple years or so, I've actually been playing a lot in playing guitar in bands and playing bass. I'm sort of like a hired gun for bass in New York, or not right now, obviously. But and I have a band that I lead called Phlebotomists, which is like a psych punk sort of thing. And I basically spent a lot the past 3 years or so mostly focusing on that sort of stuff. And then Fake Phone Number came about because just simply I realized it had been too long since I had been working on some electronic music, something that I didn't have to, that was just a one track take, and then it was not writing lyrics, something that I wanted to take a little less seriously. And I finally got an Electron Octatrack sequencer, which that's really the end of the story right there. And
Yeah. Is there any story behind the name Fake Phone Number?
yes, there is actually. So basically I had my identity stolen like 4 times in the past couple of years, in really, really ridiculous ways. I've moved around a lot, and I've had deaths in the family, so I've had a lot of my legal info is in jeopardy, as anyone who's gone through shit like that knows. That you work with so many different talking to so many different like authority figures and officials and giving your information to so many people is bound to happen. But the one that really inspired me, it's happened to me like 4 times the past couple of years. I've had fraudulent credit card charges and phone bills. But the best one that really inspired the fake phone number thing was, every once in a while you get a call from a number that has like your own area code, but it's not your number. And you pick, and it's like maybe close to your number. And this a couple of years ago, so I like pick it up, and it was a scam. And I was like, oh, this is some scam thing. I kept getting these calls, and I guess I picked up one too many of them or something. And one day I woke up, I get my phone bill through text. Good morning, Ari Finkel. Your phone bill for the month of May 2019 or whatever is $10,500.
Oh gosh.
And so I realized that my identity had been stolen. It was routing. My phone number was being used somewhere in Burkina Faso, basically, is where the scam was taking place, and someone had been able to like latch another phone onto my number so that all the calls they made were went through my phone. So, and it was this incredibly hilarious thing where they gave me like these I had to, I got my phone service shut off for weeks, and I had to wait for them to have a whole like, hearing about it. And I had to like say, yes, this is true and not true about it. And they would give me these records about my phone calls, and it would be like, New Jersey, New Jersey, New Jersey, New Jersey, everything's in New Jersey, New York, where I'm actually making calls. And it was like, okay, sir, but for the 100 hours of calls in West Africa, you didn't.
Yeah, you sure you didn't have those? Yeah.
I didn't actually, yeah. But I just thought it was one of those like insane, like hyper modern quandaries that was just like really annoying, but at the time it was funny in retrospect. And is just like kept being like those goddamn fake phone numbers. Like I should never have picked up that fake phone
Yeah,
number.
yeah, definitely. And then going to the album itself, it's called Battle Royale on Paper, and it has a pretty interesting album cover. It has like a little double star drawn on a quarter. It's the city of New York versus Ari Finkel, and then it has like this still photo of an intersection that looks like it's from a security camera footage. So yeah, can you talk about that, and then I guess also just the album name itself?
Yeah. Oh, the title and the cover, yeah, very much connected in terms of what I was talking about before, like if you have extenuating legal circumstances, deaths in your family, other people that you have to take care of, whatever it be, everything is logged digitally these days. They have a record of everything you do and everything you've ever done, and your name and your identity, and they assign numbers to it, and they assign all these things. And so, there's certain things: voting, changing my address, moving, taking care of family matters that. It's just another phrase that popped into my head. I felt like it was literally a battle royale on paper. I mean, it's the most frustrating thing sometimes, these vague legal bureaucracy scenarios you have to go through, jumping through hoops, and it relates to the cover definitely because, one, it's an anti-capitalist album for sure. I mean, all my music is heavily anti-capitalist, and the pentagram on the quarter was just a fun thing for me to do, to sort of make a very on the nose, obvious statement about money being the root of all evil, and the United States actually being like incredibly successful Satanists. They're the best Satanists in the world. And that's, I'm sort of been more into like esoteric stuff like that in the past year or so, reading a lot of stuff between LaVey and Crowley, and even some Ishmael Reed, Haitian voodoo stuff, and Toni Morrison, older American esoteric stuff like that. And as for the photo of the car, which is actually not me, but it is my car, it's a photo of my roommate running a red light blatantly, driving my car in Williamsburg. And I got that in the mail, and I had already started working on this cover with the quarter and everything else like that. And I cut it out. Yeah, it was a official notice from the NYPD with this picture of my car from a traffic cam, and it said the city of New York versus Ari Finkel. And I was like, well, if that's not how I fucking feel every day living in the city already, like that's just so perfect. So I just thought it was great, and this idea of the collage sort of just slowly came together, and some of the more abstract elements, I would just work around. But definitely the photo of the car and the coin were the two main things that I wanted to be on the album.
Yeah, so going from that like visual aesthetic value, and then talking about kind of how the album sounds and its aesthetics, it does seem to have sometimes like a similar sort of collage effect with the different samples you throw in, and how they kind of like interact with each other and how you play with those. So you can talk a little bit about your process with throwing these samples in, how you found them, and how you kind of make them interact.
Yeah, definitely. That's a big part of the album that I thought I wanted to pursue, because it sort of stands out to me from other albums in that genre that I was pursuing, I guess, whatever you could call that. But I use this application called Audio Hijack. We had some trouble with last time.
Yeah.
And I just basically have a huge document on my computer that anytime I'm like one of those people that likes to have TV going all the time in the house, I rarely am actually watching it fully, which I think is definitely part of the inspiration for the album too. But I have a huge, enormous sheet with hundreds and hundreds of samples that I just draw from. Basically, I watch whenever I'm watching TV or movie or something, and I hear something that could be a good sample, I immediately pause it, write down the timestamp, and write down the line. I've got the document in front of me now. It's hundreds of lines. So basically, when I'm working on songs, I just pull out stuff from these lists. I don't sample it right away. I just write down the dialogue, and then when I'm working on songs, I go through the list, and when I need some dialogue or some background noises or something to sort of set the mood and the plot of the song or whatever you want to call it, I just sort of go through it. So, and it can be from anything like, I mean, obviously, like the idea of like turning silly samples into something scary, like the intro samples on the album, the first track are from Hey Arnold.
There is no ghost. There is no such thing as ghost. Ghost? Did you say ghost? Hey, not so fast, kid. Listen, you don't want to disturb the spirits in a night like this. You don't want to mess with the unknown. I messed with the unknown one time. What happened? Nothing.
But then there's also some really serious, there's people talking about depression and conspiracy theories, and I sampled the weapons manufacturer Raytheon's YouTube channel for the track Raytheon. These absolutely horrifying videos they have uploaded on their YouTube channel of like really well done 3D simulations of just how fucking well their weapons are going to like annihilate a mountainside in Afghanistan or something like that. The purpose of the samples is to sort of set a narrative tone, and when it gets even more complex in tracks like Nightshade and Stiff specifically, I actually rearrange the dialogue to create new conversations and create almost an actual sort of plot for the song, which can be really, really, but that's been some of my favorite stuff, rearranging characters' lines so it makes it so they're having different conversations than they are in the movies. And a lot of that inspiration comes from just, really genuine drum and bass stuff. Breakcore specifically is like a subgenre that I was really, really into in high school. Like I remember my friends and I had this joke that we only listen to breakcore, I think but it's the recognition of a pop culture aspect in a song that's otherwise really obscure, I think, has a unique effect on listeners.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, we talked about this during the last interview. But yeah, like you were saying on Stiffs, I think it's really cool how it says like closest I come ever to death is staying on 2nd Avenue and watching the Stiffs go by in a hearse. And then right after that, you have like the homicide sample. And like you were saying, it like creates a plot of like, the hearse driving by with kind of the way it fades in and out.
Listen, the closest I ever come to death is standing on the corner on 2nd Avenue watching the Stiffs go by in a hearse. All right? That's the way I like it.
And I guess that is kind of leads us to like, that song's pretty dark. And just kind of the whole dark overtones of the whole album. How'd you decide to create something with this kind of atmosphere?
Well, I wanted it. I think the darkness is the base level of it. To me, actually, there's a lot of humor in it, but it is definitely dark humor, and it's based in sort of this aspect of like terror and relief. I don't know. I definitely wanted, part of making electronic music for me, as opposed to songwriting, which is something that I do a lot also, is the instant gratification factor and being able to push the envelope in terms of literally that, like, since I do spend so much time playing guitar and traditional instruments, I find when I'm working on electronic music, I want to exploit the parameters that electronic music allows me to. So I don't know what I'm trying to say. I don't know why I decided. I don't know if it was a conscious decision to make like a really dark album, but I'll retell the story that I told last time. I made the album after I took a lot of LSD last summer, and I had one particularly crazy experience where I bought acid from a guy that I had bought acid from before, and it was very chill acid, and it was functional, and I was taking it, recording some music with my friends, and I got back from a safe this trip that I was on, and I was like, oh, I want to do that again. I'll take some more of this guy's acid and work on some music. I bought acid from him, and it turned out that, long story short, he told me he was selling me 2 tabs, but it was actually 4, and they had been dipped in the solution, which is what I found out afterwards. So I have never taken 4 tabs of acid in my life, and probably wouldn't have done it intentionally. The most I've ever done is 2, and that was, But long story short, I fucking totally dosed myself with this insane dose of acid that I was completely unprepared for, and had a extremely terrifying come up where I'd never really experienced the sort of real, like, psychedelic fear like that people talk about when they talk about, like, you're looking at yourself from across the room, and you really feel like this might never end. And, I was engaging in all these thoughts that were not, I could not describe in an interview really. But basically it was very, very fucking scary at first, and I was like really regretting it. And then at a certain point, I decided I just needed to put on some music that I loved, and I was trying to listen to all this chill music like jazz, and I was trying to listen to Sorcerer by Miles Davis, and I was trying to listen to some ambient music, and it was making me so fucking anxious. I decided to throw it in the other direction. I went on YouTube and put on a video of The Birthday Party, my favorite post-punk band, playing live. And it was in that moment that everything sort of switched, and for whatever reason or not, I was able to sort of overcome this horrifying terror, and all of a sudden it flipped on its head, and then it became like this hilarious experience. And I think The Birthday Party is a great example of that, because they're like, besides being one of my favorite bands, it's like the definition of something that's like inherently scary, you know, looks just menacing and terrifying and sleazy, and but there's like this insane humor to it. And I found, you know, within half an hour I was cracking up, laughing out loud, and just this. And I was watching this video. I was like, this is so insane. And like, they just look like a bunch of like fucking vampires playing in cowboy outfits, playing this crazy music. And I was just laughing hysterically. And like, from then on, it turned into this really positive trip where it was very much like I felt like very proud of myself for having overcome this scary, very like it was like a stereotypical like dare experience at first, you know. It's like something they would show you in a dare video, but that was a huge influence for me. And I think the next week after that, I was obviously in a very strange headspace, and one of the things that I took from it was that I just very simply thought, like, one of my first thoughts the next morning was like, man, I've got to make some fucking music that makes me laugh like that, you know. Like I love, you know. And I was like just thinking about all the art I like, and I really like dark humor, and I wanted something to sort of take it out of my control. And I thought that, yeah, the sampler would be a perfect thing for that, where it's like you have, which I thought was a good connection to the sort of, if you were to use like a psychedelic trip for a metaphor, like the idea of like trying to gain control over something that's maybe a little bit out of your control, and sort of, you know, especially since I was learning the octatrack while I was making it. So it's like certain things, you know, you let it go out of your control for a while in terms of,
Right.
So I started it August 2019 and finished it by early October. So it was a very quick process of actually making the album once I decided to sit down and do it.
So if you were going just theoretically to like plot this trip you had, I feel like it kind of almost works with the track listing you have, because I feel like the first half of the album is really building up tension, and then on Raytheon you have like these really rapid break beats that kind of release a bunch of energy. And they have Needles, California, which takes it a step further with these really punishing, I guess, what you would call like drum abuse. And then like after that, Nightshade Part 2 is much brighter sounding, much more relaxed, I guess, kind of when you're able to flip it on its head and chill out.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess, you know, talk about, I guess, the track listing and how you kind of thought about organizing the tracks to create this narrative and through line.
Yeah, it's interesting because some of the tracks towards the end were some of the first tracks that I made, actually. Love Stinks Dub was the first track I made, and Raytheon was the next one, and then Green, Blue, and Black was the next one after that. It's interesting, actually, some of the lighter, more positive tracks are some of the ones that I started with, actually. But that gives you an idea, like, and those are all on the second half of the record. So
Yeah.
I made a lot, yeah. The order in which I made them is certainly not the order that they appear on the record. But I played around for many, many days and listened to many, many different combinations. And I really, wanted it to flow. And something like you're saying, like, it was a very intentional decision having something like Raytheon. Like, I was like, okay, do I have it chill out now or do I keep it going? You know, it's like, it's nice to be able to make those very conscious decisions about, like, no, I'm gonna like keep it going, and then like you think it's gonna chill out, and then it chills out finally. But there's a lot of fucking around with the track order to get that sort of, you know, experience that I wanted of energy and calm, and I think it works really well actually at the end of the day.
Yeah, I like the end track, Halloween All Year. I feel like it's very kind of takes all the elements of the album and puts it together into a very cohesive track. And also just like the title, it's like a good description of 2020.
That actually was the last track I made, which almost never happens when I make an album. I almost never make the last track. I did sort of feel an obligation to make one more track that felt like it was a bit lighter, ending on a lighter note, but also incorporated all the aspects of the stuff that was on the album before, with the sort of ambient bass and an odd time signature and a little vocal sample and stuff like that. But that was one of the quickest tracks I made, honestly, and Halloween's my favorite holiday, so I felt like I just wanted to give it like a silly, positive sort of title after this extremely intense album.
Yeah. Did living in New York, I guess, when I listen to the album, I think of walking around in kind of this creepy part of a city in the middle of the night. I was wondering if like living in New York and how much you really thought about the physical environment when you're making it, and if that gets represented in the music.
Definitely. It would be undeniable to say that it wasn't. I mean, just based off of that, I'm from New York. I grew up in New Jersey. I went to school at Purchase, which is, you know, meant that I was in the city every weekend, and I've lived in Brooklyn now for the past 3 or 4 years. I also lived in Jersey City for a while before this. all the things that you think about when you think about a noir New York City movie, most of the time probably don't exist in New York City anymore because it's like a fucking Sephora where, you know, the creepy alley should be. But Jersey City is like actually really like that. So I think Jersey City, living there, played a huge influence on me too, because there's a lot of parts of Jersey City that are, you know, actually completely cut off from the outdoor shopping mall bullshit of Manhattan and Brooklyn, and legitimately places like I am not going to walk down, you know, Maple Street after 10:30 in my neighborhood of Jersey City.
Right.
Whereas like you're hard pressed to actually find that in New York in most places. But yeah, definitely. I mean, there's cop car. I live on Myrtle Broadway now. I don't know how familiar you are with Brooklyn, but it is absolutely insane. I mean, it's a heroin capital. There's people shooting heroin everywhere. There's police vans and helicopters everywhere. I mean, and now it's obviously more so than ever before. But I am definitely not like a huge, like, I have a lot of problems with living in the city and probably plan to actually leave here eventually, but I can't also cut myself off from the aesthetic devotion I have to certain parts of it, you know. And it would be impossible to. And my parents are from here. My dad and his whole family are, you know, just like New York Jews from Queens and the Bronx. So it's in my blood, and it's in the music that I make, no matter what. You know, it'll always. Yeah. It's funny too, because I think a lot of the music that I make that's not fake phone number is trying to sort of project myself outside of the city more, and try to imagine different landscapes and different scenarios that are more escapist, whereas fake phone number is trying to channel something very literally. And yeah, my sort of everyday experience living here, whatever that means.
Well, I did want to make sure, like last time, that we touched on the song Needles, California, that you previously referred to as the Fuck Trump song, just because I think it's a very satisfying song to listen to right now. And yeah, just I guess let's talk about that a little bit. Just want to make sure we mentioned it.
Oh yeah, that's what all the Fuck Trump track. Obviously inspired a lot by Gabber and Happy Hardcore, and for anyone wondering, the sample is of Cat Williams talking about Trump.
Trump don't give a fuck.
Yeah, the Fuck Trump thing. I wanted to make the track. I had the track going before I put the Fuck Trump sample in it, but I did have the Fuck Trump sample as just its own thing in another file on my sampler, and I was like, I need to combine this, do something with it, because it's too good. I mean, and it is funny because obviously Trump is, I mean, no one could ever say fuck Trump enough, but he's obviously like the low-hanging fruit for, right. You know, there's a lot of other politicians who, you know, Trump is almost not even worth, obviously he's worth criticizing, but he can't be reasoned with, and it's like, but I felt like because he's the lowest hanging fruit, he's the most hateable, and he's, you know, he's the fucking president. I can't believe I have to say that out loud, but I feel it's just a unifying thing. I mean, everyone I know, I feel like most people who are listening to my music are, you know, going to hear that track and they're going to want to go fuck Trump. You know, people. Yeah. That's generally the sentiment. As for the title too, is interesting. We started in New Mexico where it's mostly Democrats, but as we moved through Arizona and the desert outskirts of California, I mean, we literally saw effigies to Trump. I mean, like really, you know, 15-foot high, hand carved wood sculptures and signs and stuff like that of Trump. You know, everyone was so happy. We were on our way to LA, and one morning we woke up in this town called Needles, California, that was just a very bizarre town that clearly had a lot of like military stuff going on, and was it was just a very bizarre vibe. And I found out later, someone told me, I believe that town is actually, my computer's running a little slow, so I can't look it up. I believe it actually is in the Grapes of Wrath or something, or a book like that. And it's the first town they end up in California after this long travel, I guess. And I just thought that was really interesting because that's sort of how I felt there too, because we were in Arizona, and you know, once you, I don't know, also if you this was November, so once you cross the border and go, you know, pretty far into California over Arizona, if you do it at night, which we did, we, you know, fell asleep, it was 45 degrees, and we woke up and it was 95 degrees in California at the motel. I felt like that was just a good indicator too of like Trump had just been elected like 2 days ago, and things were just changing very, very quickly. And I'll always associate the Trump presidency with that weird road trip. So the track title has less to do with the content of the song and just more like a personal memento.
Well, what a better note than to kind of end the interview on that. But you have contributed a 30-minute mix for the show, in which you say it's kind of like a mix of abstract music. So if you want to say anything about the mix you created.
Yeah, the mix, I don't make a lot of mixes, or I haven't in a long time. So I just threw together some stuff that I had been listening to as of recently. The music that's in the mix is actually a little bit more recent than what I was listening to. But I think if you like the album, you'll enjoy the mix. It's actually probably a little more low-key in the album. It's not full-on electronic music. It is, but there's some like post-punk stuff in there. And the theme is sort of like pulsing, repetitive tracks that have indecipherable vocals over them. I think almost all the tracks have some sort of weird vocal thing going on that's not singing, that's not quite spoken word, but came together very quickly. There's no transitions or anything like that, but I think it's a good representation of some. I tried to throw some new music. I think it's mostly new music, actually.
And you got an unreleased track in there yourself that I really enjoyed. Yeah.
That track is actually from a year before the album. A full year before the album, so it's a different vibe. It's a lot brighter, but that will be coming out eventually, and some more stuff like that. That's a little more. I would say it's a little bit more ambiguous genre-wise.
Thanks so much for. I guess listeners, this is the second interview. The first interview did not get recorded properly, so that's why we keep on saying last time. That's what we're referring to. But yeah, thanks so much.
Yeah. So much for having me on the show. I'm really glad you dig the album and dig the mix. And defund the police, Black Lives Matter, support Black-owned businesses, and listen to Black music, because techno, which I'm being interviewed about today, owes almost everything to it. And
yes,
trained in jazz too is my biggest background. It is kind of infinitely indebted to it. So for every listen you'd listen to of my album, please go and listen to some Drexia and some Andrew Hill and some Miles and Doc, an incredible new album. I'm just going to plug this today because there's so much, I feel like faster breakbeat music and techno and shit is super whitewashed these days. And one of my good friends, producer Acemo, people listening to the show probably know Acemo, drum and bass producer from Brooklyn, one of my best friends who I went to college with, just sent me this morning, and I'm going to plug it. Native Distortion by Azazone. That's Azazone. Usually goes under the name Doc, the Kim from Leading Records in Los Angeles. And it is some of the fastest, most insane high energy. If you like Fake Phone Numbers, definitely listen to it by a Black artist who's just been out here for years. So gotta plug that, because if you like Fake Phone Number, go and listen to it.
Sounds great. I'll definitely give it a listen.
But yeah, man, thank you again.
Are now listening to a mix of quote-unquote abstract music, brought to you by Fake Phone Number.
Journey that you never planned. I am the wave you'll never see land. I am the fire not born of a spark. I am the vehicle that'll never be parked. I am the houses in which you have stayed. I am the places you pass every day.
Lire attentivement ce mot d'emploi. diese Anteilung aufmerksam durch und bewahren sie zum späteren Namensschlag gut auf.
Documentary
Welcome back to uslayradio.com. Thank you so much for sticking throughout the show. Next week we have something very exciting. On Thursday at 3 p.m. Pacific Time and 5 p.m. Central Time, I'm going to be interviewing Michael Latuja on Instagram Live. And he's a great jazz bassist. He just came out with the album Lagos Pepper Soup, which is a fantastic fusion of jazz and Afrobeat. And he'll also be doing a 30-minute performance, so don't miss that. Again, that's at 3 p.m. Pacific Time and 5 p.m. Central Time. See you next Thursday.